Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Warriors podcast. The podcast focused on the two best feeder leagues to the UFC, Cage Warriors and the Legacy Fighting Alliance. And this week, we're honing in on LFA 202, which goes down in Niagara Falls, New York, and brings a flyweight headliner between probably one of the best flyweight prospects in the North American circuit, Fumi Nkuta, as he goes up against Adrian Garcia, who is looking to go 2-0 under the LFA banner. In total, we have 9 fights, but only 8 of them are pro, and those are the fights that I'm going to be focusing on for this podcast. Usually, if you are in the new Niagara Falls region, I would recommend that you definitely go check these guys out. It's always a fun time at the Seneca Hotel and Resort, I believe it is, and casino. A phenomenal time. Any time that I've gone to visit and watch their fights, I've already gone to 2 LFA cards down there. Hell of a time. I would highly recommend that you guys check it out as well. Usually there's a couple tickets still lingering around on fight day, so if you're in the area, make sure you guys go check them out. Otherwise, they'll have, I believe, considering there's only 8 fights, they should have all their prelims on YouTube, and then the main card is obviously going to be going down on UFC Fight Pass. All right, I don't want to waste too much time here. I want to get right into the breakdowns for you guys. Like I said, we got 8 fights to talk about. A lot of chalk on this card from a betting perspective. I'm not sure how many underdogs are going to be able to spring the upset, but I will do my best in terms of highlighting which ones I believe are live underdogs. But there are not many that I'm actually picking to actually get their hand raised on this card. So let's get right into this thing. First fight, Peter Lucitt coming in at plus 285, going up against Elias Rodriguez, who comes in at minus 350. Now, Lucitt came up short in his LFA debut last time around as you went up against Stav Koren, who's a solid LFA prospect. Koren was able to get him to the ground pretty quickly, find the submission, and get him out of there in the first round. Lucitt went 7-1 as an amateur, but doesn't seem to be jumping out or jumping off the page in terms of any specific martial art. He seems to be a decent all-around fighter, but it's clear that the LFA continues to bring him in to test him against even higher level prospects, and that's exactly what he's facing this weekend with Elias Rodriguez. Now, often you see Corey Sandhagen in Rodriguez's corner, and I'd be surprised if he's not in his corner this weekend. Rodriguez, very slick, very good striker, enters the pocket very well, pivots off very well, but I think where he is best is when he's able to get his opponents to the ground, and then from there he's able to transition to dominant positions, look for submissions, look for TKOs from that top position. I believe when he went 5-0 as an amateur, he finished all but one of his opponents, and obviously he was able to finish his LFA and pro debut a couple months back when he was able to get that rear naked choke at the ending of the second round. Look for him to go out there and dominate Lucitt in this matchup. I think Rodriguez is probably one of the safest spots on this entire card, as I think he is extremely talented, and I think he should go out there and just establish his game without much issue, and I think he eventually gets to finish here probably within 2 rounds. Next up, we're going to be talking about Kevin Carrier coming in at minus 740, going up against Kyle Pufahl, who comes in at plus 540. Now, Carrier is a local kid who's fought some decent competition. Last time around, he was able to finish a 3-4 opponent by arm triangle choke. He did get hit a few times in that matchup, and that, made the crowd a little bit queasy, but Carrier was able to battle through it, get to his own offense, and eventually get the fight to the ground and get to the jiu-jitsu, which is where he seems to be most effective. I'm not overly impressed with the guy, and I'm kind of surprised he's all the way at minus 750, as Kyle Pufahl is not a complete pushover. He's not a complete tomato can. This is a guy that has a decent 5-2 record. His 2 losses are coming against standout regional guys, or at least guys that are on the hotter side of things in the regional scene. But since then, he's on a 4-fight winning streak, finishing his opponents, all but one of them, I believe. He's also been able to get a couple of them out of there very quickly. I believe he finished one of them in 9 seconds. So it's clear he has some pop on his shots, and he's athletic, seems to be fully committed to the mixed martial arts game, which is why I'm kind of surprised why he's such a big underdog in this fight. At plus 540, I have to take a little bit of a shot on him, even if it's just a 0.1, 0.2 unit sprinkle just to win 1 unit here. I'm going to be predicting Carrier to win this fight because I think if he is able to get this fight to the ground, that's where he'll start to shine, and that's where he'll be able to get Pufahl out of there. But if this fight stays in the striking realm, and seeing what I saw last time Carrier fought in the stand-up realm, Pufahl could potentially give him some issues there, land some big shots, and maybe even put him away. So as a big underdog, Pufahl is worth a little bit of a consideration, but in terms of an actual prediction, I'm going to be going with Kevin Carrier, and I think he eventually gets the submission in round 2. All right, next up, Jade Sheeley coming in at plus 250, going up against Christina Brador, who comes in at minus 300. Now, Sheeley comes from a kickboxing background, but in her last couple of fights, it's been obvious that she's working on her grappling and she wants to assert it almost immediately. I believe she's on a 3-fight winning streak, and the second last win that she had actually came off of a disqualification due to her opponent, Kendra McIntyre, illegally kicking her in the face while she was trying to defend an armbar attempt from Sheeley. Now, Sheeley was able to obviously get a legitimate victory last time around as she bullied her opponent to the ground, quickly got to the back, and you could see some of the rawness in her grappling game in that fight as she was kind of twerking on some chokes that weren't really in, and they were kind of just more trying to hurt her opponent. But luckily, she wasn't facing that high level of an opponent, and eventually her opponent was forced to tap, even though the rear naked choke was on the jaw and not completely sunk in. It's clear she's strong, she's physical, but there are some mistakes that she's going to have taken advantage of, especially in this matchup against a more well-rounded fighter. Christina Brador is a very physical and very strong fighter that loves to push the pace, stay in her opponent's face, and really just be aggressive with her strikes, which could be a little reckless at times, but she likes to utilize her physicality by dragging opponents to the ground, and then from there looking for submissions or ability or positions to rain down some ground and pound. Last time around, she was able to pick up a submission victory over Ailini David, I believe her name is, pretty quickly, got her to the ground, got to the back, and sunk in a clean rear naked choke that David was eventually forced to tap out with. Prior to that, Brador came up short against Leslie Hernandez, who just fought on the Contender series this past season, and that was a split decision loss for Brador, and I thought it could have gone either way, but I think Brador definitely learned a lot from that fight, specifically that she has to be a little bit more damage centric when she is looking to apply her grappling, because it was a little bit more of damage from Hernandez that seemingly allowed Hernandez to get that win. But in this matchup, I think Brador's physicality will be too much for Jade Sheeley to deal with. Sheeley might be able to land some decent damage on the feet, but I think eventually Brador will be able to get this fight to the ground. I think her submission defense is good enough to avoid anything Sheeley might be looking to throw up off of her back, and that will allow Brador to get to some dominant positions, and I think she might be able to get to a spot where she should be able to get a finish. So I'm going to go with Brador here. I think she's worth the chalk in this spot, and I think the majority of her success will come on the ground. All right, next up, Firdaus Nayimi coming in at minus 700, going up against Jacob Wiggins coming in at plus 500. Now, Nayimi is one of the best prospects on the Canadian regional scene, but he's done a lot of his work under the USA regional shows, especially when he was an amateur. He's had obviously the majority of his professional fights under the unified banner now, but I'm glad to see him get signed to the LFA, and hopefully they continue to bring him along, especially if he continues to be successful. From what I saw from his amateur days, he utilized a lot of wrestling and grappling to get his wins, and he's very dominant when he did assert himself from that top position, but he does have a kickboxing and Muay Thai background, which he showed off in droves last time around as he clubbed and subbed his opponent within a minute and a half. Now he gets to showcase his skills on the LFA scene, and it's kind of tough to truly trust him as a big favorite here, as there's not too much tape available on Jacob Wiggins. Now, Wiggins comes in at plus 500. I wasn't able to uncover too much about him. He's 4-3 as an amateur. He's an Army vet. He's the head coach of an MMA gym. He currently holds a 4-0 pro record, although the majority of those wins against very sketchy competition. Trains out of Michigan, which is close enough to Niagara Falls that I'm believing that he's kind of being put on the card because he's from the region and might be able to sell some tickets. And as of June 2023, he seems to have a BJJ blue belt. As of from what I've been able to uncover about Wiggins, it makes sense why Nayimi is the big favorite in this spot, but you want to be very hesitant, especially when you're not able to get the full picture on an opponent and looking to fade them with such a big favorite here. I do pick Nayimi to still win this matchup. I think he'll get to his wrestling. I think he'll get to his grind, and I think he eventually grinds this opponent out. I'm not 100% sure if he gets the finish, but I am going to take Nayimi to win this matchup, but I would pass on that minus 700 line. All right, next up, Sierra Dinwoodie coming in at minus 450, going up against Nicole Aguirre, who comes in at plus 350. Now, last time around, Dinwoodie fought a year ago, actually for the LFA show as well, and it was a very hard-fought battle for her. Her first 2 pro fights were finishes, but in the third fight against Hope Chase, she was very much pushed in that fight. She was getting out-grappled in the first round. She managed to bounce back in the second round and had some very close rear naked choke attempts, very deep chokes, so shout out to Hope Chase for being able to get out of those spots. And then in the third round, it seemed like Chase was snatching the momentum back in her favor, but Dinwoodie was able to reverse a position, get to that top position, and start raining down ground and pound to end off that fight, which ultimately allowed her to win that fight 29-28 on the scorecards. She's big. She's physical for this bantamweight division, which is usually enough at this stage in women's MMA careers to get away with that and possibly even get close to making it to the UFC. She was from the west coast of Canada, but in recent years has moved to the east coast and started training with Crew Lynn down at House of Champions in Hamilton and Stony Creek, which is a great gym in the Ontario scene. And it seems like she's really brushing up on the technical aspects of her game, which I think is going to be very important if she hopes to make it to the next level. She's going up against a BJJ black belt here, Nicole Aguirre, who trains out of San Diego and comes in with an undefeated 2-0 professional record. She was pretty much steamrolling her opponents due to the fact that she's clearly the more skilled fighter in those matchups, utilizing some good Muay Thai, some good knees, and some good elbows, looking for takedowns and try to submit her opponents, or getting that full mount and just pounding her opponents out. She seems to be a decent prospect who might be able to pull off the upset here, but I believe at the end of the day, it's going to be the physicality and strength of Dinwoodie that should keep her safe in this matchup. As long as she doesn't get her arm snatched up or finds herself in a choke by the BJJ black belt, I expect Dinwoodie to control this matchup and really grind this fight out. The over 2.5 at plus money has a little bit of my attention, considering I expect this to be a fight where both women are jockeying for position and looking for control time. The only way I possibly see a finish is if Aguirre is able to snatch up a submission, or if Dinwoodie gets a dominant enough position and Aguirre gasses herself out and she's able to posture up with some big strikes. But at plus 115, plus 120 for the over 2.5, I could see this bantamweight matchup actually going to the scorecards. But my prediction is going to be Dinwoodie, not too hot on her minus 450 line, but she should win this matchup by grinding out the San Diego native. All right, next up, Joe Taylor coming in at plus 215, going up against Philip Latu coming in at minus 255. Now, this matchup between strikers goes down between a 39, maybe 40-year-old Joe Taylor, who actually retired from MMA last time around as he competed for the LFA last year. He was able to outstrike his opponent, Gabriel Timoteo, win that fight on the scorecards, showcasing his boxing background, really touching up Timoteo from distance, showcased some decent grappling in the first round by stopping the takedowns, ending up in top position and landing some good shots. But it's all about the striking for him, and he does not really push the pace in terms of looking for finishes, as only one of his 6 professional wins have come by finish. This guy's very comfortable with just staying at range, picking his opponents apart, utilizing his combinations, and looking for openings to take advantage of his opponents. His athleticism and strength allows him to keep fights upright, which is often why we see him go out there and be successful in the striking room, because his opponents are forced to strike with him. Now, I don't know if that's what he wants to do here, as he's taking on another striker in Philip Latu, who came up short in his Dana White Contender Series opportunity back in September, as he went up against a very highly touted prospect in Navajo Sterling. Latu has some K1 kickboxing background. He has some Muay Thai background as well, and it's clear that he's very good when he can pick his opponents apart and get into that striking groove. He has some decent power, some stinging power, but he has good enough cardio to go 15 minutes if he needs to. We don't don't often see him look to grapple, and he's a guy that trains out of Team Elevation, so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to mix it up and actually look to get the boxer to the mat here, but I don't think he'll be too successful in keeping him there or having too much success in that realm. Look for this matchup to be a somewhat back and forth striking battle, with Taylor having a little bit of success considering the technical advantages he'll have with his hands, but I think the superior striker and the guy who's closer to his prime right now in Philip Latu will end up coming out on top. Minus 255 is just a little bit too wide of a line for my liking. The over 1.5 around minus 175, I think that's intriguing, as I think this will be a competitive back and forth striking matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some clinching here. Maybe Latu looking to utilize some of his Muay Thai, getting some knees going, getting some elbows. But I think the physicality of Taylor will keep him safe enough from eating too much damage and eventually seeing the second and possibly even third round. But I'm still going to go Latu here. I think he ends up winning this fight either with a late finish or on the scorecards. But again, minus 255, a little bit wide for my liking. All right, next up, Shuya Kamikubo coming in at minus 600, going up against Matias Santos, who comes in at plus 425. Now, Kamikubo was a former Road to UFC competitor back in 2023, where he ended up losing, I believe, in the semifinals to Long Zhao. Kamikubo has one of the best motors and engines that I've ever seen compete in terms of his ability to continuously push a pace, stay in his opponent's space, and just crowd him and eventually look to take him to the ground, and from there it just is a relentless fighter in terms of just looking for ground and pound, looking for submission opportunities, and just overwhelming his opponents by just bullying them against the cage or dragging them to the ground and just staying consistent with that. He hasn't competed since December of 2023, but he has been staying active in the grappling world, which leads me to believe that he's just been waiting for an opportunity to arise. And luckily the LFA is providing him in a platform on the North American side of things so that he can still stay on the UFC's radar, because I would love to see him on that platform considering the type of style that he brings to the table. Now, he was scheduled to fight a different opponent, and Santos took this fight on a few days' notice, coming up from Brazil, training alongside Charles Oliveira in that Shoot Box Diego Lima camp. He seems to be more of a BJJ specialist and a striker. He does not look all that comfortable in the striking realm. He has some nasty kicks, as you would expect, but once he starts getting hit clean, it seems like he kind of looks for ways to get the fight into the grappling realm, whether it's from desperation takedowns or just falling to his back and hoping his opponent will follow him there. He's made his rounds in the MMA world. He's obviously gone over to Russia and come up short in a lot of those matchups. Currently on a 3-fight winning streak, but over complete tomato cans, in my opinion. I think that was more so to just get his confidence back. But now he's fighting a very tough Kamikubo on short notice as well. It probably won't work out the best for him here. I think Kamikubo will really put the pressure on Santos here. I don't think Kamikubo will have too much trouble in terms of closing the distance, getting this fight to the ground. Kamikubo not the greatest in the striking realm, but just his sheer will to close the distance and get a hold of his opponents will help him in this spot against Santos. I think his defensive grappling will be good enough to stay away from anything that Santos looks to throw up at him, and that will allow Kamikubo to just control the fight, control the pace, and I think that will allow him to get to a position to find that ground and pound victory over Santos. So I do like the under 2.5, which currently sits around minus 135. All but one of Santos's losses have come by finish, and Kamikubo has split all 14 of his wins, 7 of them by decision, 7 of them by finish. I believe the majority of those finishes coming by TKO, and I think he can do that here by putting Santos into some bad spots, breaking him, and then eventually finishing him within a round and a half to 2.5 rounds. But I like Kamikubo here, and I don't mind him at this chalky minus 600 price tag. All right. That brings us to our flyweight headliner, which could easily be for a title, but it is what it is. We got Fumi and Nkuta coming in at minus 800, going up against Adrian Garcia, who comes in at plus 550. Now, Nkuta is one of the top prospects on the North American circuit. For some reason, it just doesn't seem like the UFC wants him, or there might be some issues with the matchmakers or something like that. But Nkuta has won titles for 2 different promotions, and the LFA could easily put the title on the line here, considering the level of skill that he normally brings to the table. His striking is probably the weaker side of his game, but it's really his grappling where he's able to assert his dominance, getting opponents to the ground, either grinding them out or getting to dominant positions. He does a great job of getting the back, and even when opponents are able to get out of that back mount, he's able to just quickly transition, flip his hips, and get back on top of them, and then get back to work with his elbows and his nasty ground and pound. This is one of the best fighters on the regional scene, and which is why whenever you see him mentioned, people are just giving glaring reviews or rave reviews because of how good he is. And whenever you see him on Best Fight Outs, just go through his Best Fight Outs page. This guy is always a massive favorite, just as we see this weekend. And I'm expecting him to probably do the same thing to Adrian Garcia here. But I don't want to fully go balls to the wall on fading Garcia. Now, I did try to fade Garcia last time around with Park, and Garcia put on a great performance there, pulling off the upset and winning that fight pretty convincingly. I thought Park was going to be the cleaner striker, but Garcia did a great job in terms of continuously crashing the pocket, putting the pressure on Park, and landing combinations consistently enough that it seemed to muzzle Park, and Park had no answer for anything in return. Anytime he tried throwing offense, we saw him get countered by Garcia, and Garcia even tried getting this fight into the grappling realm, which is not something we often see from him. Usually when fighters are the ones getting the grappling going against Garcia, they're able to be successful with it and keep him in those bad spots to keep him away from the striking prowess that he brings to the table. Now, technically speaking, Garcia might be the slightly better striker in this matchup, but not by a whole lot. This is not a spot where Garcia, I believe, will be able to keep it up long enough to take advantage of that. I think Nkuta will do a great job in terms of crashing the pocket consistently, getting this fight to the ground, and keeping Garcia on the defensive. I think the over 2.5 is probably the way to go here. I'm not entirely, I believe it's roughly around minus 200, so it seems like the public is kind of privy to that. But I do like Nkuta here, minus 800, a little bit out of my price range here, especially because Garcia might go out there and, surprise us once again. I don't know if I have PTSD because I faded Garcia at chalk last time around, which is why I'm kind of a little bit skeptical here. But again, Nkuta is one of the best prospects on the regional scene, and I expect him to show out once again here by putting on a very dominant performance. And hopefully it's one that catches the UFC matchmaker's eyes, because this is a guy that deserves to be in the UFC right off the bat, or at least, bare minimum, given an opportunity on the Contender Series. So give me Nkuta by decision, but maybe if he wants to turn it up a notch and try to get the finish, he could possibly get that too. But I'll probably just watch this from the sidelines and see Nkuta do some work. There you guys go. Full LFA 202 breakdown for you guys. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these Legacy Warrior podcasts. We haven't done one yet for the Cage Warriors side of things because they haven't had an event this year, but in March alone they'll have 4 events, including back-to-back days on March 14th and 15th with Cage Warriors 184 and 185, but they will be returning on March 8th with Cage Warriors 183. But again, there will be another LFA card the day before or 2 days before that on LFA 203 on March 6th. So the Legacy Warriors podcast will be very busy in March. I look forward to seeing you guys in the comment section. Dropping a like, dropping a subscribe, and let me know what you guys think about these fights and these breakdowns and all that good stuff. I do have track plays for this card. Check the link in the description below for the MMA LOTN Patreon page. Otherwise, enjoy the fights, and I'll see you guys later on Friday evening as I drop my final 2 segments for the UFC Seattle card, which is going to be my free parlay as well as the prop drop, talking about all the props for every single matchup and which ones we should try to take advantage of. All right, see you guys then. Peace.